We are live now.
Good to go, Premraj?
Yeah, please.
Namaste, welcome, good morning, good afternoon, good evening in whichever part of the world you are joining us from. I am Deepak Khemani, a co-founder of Bloom. I, along with Premraj, Dr. Neeta, Abhijit Sansgiri, welcome you to today's program. Bloom is a brainchild of Miss Payal Irani. Bloom is a flower that has blossomed and is spreading its fragrance across the globe. We are into physical and mental wellness, training, speaking engagement, creating signature workshops for corporates and individuals who want to go to the next level. Bloom has a powerful and a dynamic team which has been handpicked. They are the who's who in their respective domains and are industry veterans having an accumulated 200 plus years of experience. We at Bloom strongly believe in co creation, collaboration, and teamwork. I invite each and every one of you to be a part of Bloom, where together we grow, and as Bloom blossoms, it will create ripples the world over. It's a pleasure to introduce my co host, Mr. K.V. Premraj. Premraj is a futurist, he is a thought leader, he is a speaker on leadership and management, employee engagement, HR. He is the co-author of three books, all three of whom hit the number one bestseller spot on Amazon. He has 37 years of experience in banking and financial services, both in the public and private sector. He was the CEO of the BPO arm of a leading private sector bank. On our show today, we have a very charming personality. I asked Premraj to introduce him and take the show ahead. Over to you, Premraj.
Thank you, Deepak. Thank you for that very, very flattering introduction. We have on the show today Indranil Roy, who is a seasoned talent development professional with specialization in the learning and development domain. He has 20 plus years of experience with some of the top tier global organizations. He has worked across geographies and cultures. He has been associated with some extremely impactful personal and development programs. Indranil is now with a leading global operations service organization, EXL Service, as one of their Business Tower Academy leads. Prior to that, he was the global lead capability development with Accenture in their technology vertical. Before Accenture, Indranil was a senior management consultant with IBM Global Services in the HR and talent domain. Indranil is a Gallup certified trainer and strengths coach. Along this journey, his exemplary work has been recognized with him being bestowed with numerous awards, more of which we will learn later. He is married to Barnali, who is an English language teacher, and they are blessed with a daughter and son. Welcome to the show, Indranil.
Thank you. Thank you so much for having me. And I really thank Payalji, Deepakji, Premraj, you for giving me an opportunity to speak to everybody and share my small little word of wisdom with everybody. Thank you for having me.
I've briefly introduced you. Would you like to inform our participants more about yourself and your journey in life?
Yes, I'd be most happy to. So, ideally, before I was, invited to join this platform, I never thought I had a story. I thought that I was another, person trying to make it in the corporate world. But then, for the past 2 weeks, I've been thinking a lot about, how have I come to this place? what has brought me here, the people I've met along the way. In fact, ever since Payalji sent me the link to the program, I reconnected with people that I kind of worked with decades ago, and it was a wonderful thing. Kind of when I see some names here already, part of this group. So I'm so happy to see them here, and hope this platform is going to give me that opportunity. So just to give you a small background is that I was born and raised in Assam, beautiful, idyllic kind of a village in the lush green tea estates everybody knows Assam for. So I was born there. My father was he worked in the engineering department of the state electricity board. My mother was a teacher. She used to teach initially chemistry, and very interestingly, she moved to teaching English later on. But that's how I grew up in a home. There was a lot of quest for knowledge, is what I'd say. And I used to love reading. I think when very early in my childhood, I loved to read. I became a voracious reader actually, and I'll share some stories about those as we go down this next hour or so. So I kind of grew up there. Subsequently, I moved to Guwahati, which is one of the primary cities in that region. And I was admitted to one of the most reputed boarding schools you would have heard of by the name of Sainik schools. So Sainik schools are, they are under 50% under the Ministry of Defense, 50% under the state governments where it operates. And I had one of the most scintillating, childhoods growing up amongst a disciplined, come a very exceptionally liberal, world, learning from some of the best minds out there from the defense services. And I think that is what built inside me something which makes me who I am today. Discipline, something that makes me grounded, makes me a patriot, not a nationalist, if you may. Makes me a patriot, makes me feel I'm grounded to my word, my people here, makes me feel good about what I do. And that's where kind of, I landed. I unfortunately couldn't make it to the army as an army man. Though, I think my friends and people I know from those days still tell me that I would have really bloomed, as this platform is called, into a good army man had I been there. But unfortunately, that didn't happen. But what happens for the good, and I found my calling into this in the corporate world, especially into the area of people and talent development. So this was like being a Gallup coach. I'm kind of trying to bring some of those qualities. So I was an early woo, and you may have heard of the term WOO. That's one of the strengths of the Gallup charter. I was an early woo. I could relate to people. I just loved being amongst people, whether I knew them or I didn't know them. I was among those who could have hour-long conversations even on a next call or a wrongly placed call. So that helped me. That helped me grow in my career as
Thank you for sharing that, an engaging and endearing story. You have been in the talent management space for a long time. Over the years, you would have seen the baby boomers, the millennials, Generation X, Y, and Z bloom. What are your thoughts on the working style of this distinct set of people, and what does the future hold for us? Indranil, we can't hear you.
Cannot hear you, Indranil.
Hello, can you hear me?
Yeah.
Okay, I've changed my audio device. Hopefully, this will hold.
Yeah.
Sorry. Yeah. So, I heard your question, Primrajji. So, I'm going to take that. So, what I was meaning was that many of us in this room, basically, I think we've touched upon most of these generations, including the baby boomers. We've seen our parents possibly, and some of us experienced them. I think what differentiates these generations have been a couple of things. I think the quest for questioning the status quo is one that differentiates these generations. That is one. Number two, the degree of recklessness, the degree of possibly recklessness due to the opportunities and options people have is what I think differentiates those generations. I remember in our times, people would join a company. It is like from hire to retire. They would join, spend their entire lives, retire from a place. And that's how, that's how companies used to engage with them. But then gradually, as we came to the post-millennials, early, post-millennials, the options opened up. It was not that people would still not look for long careers, but still they would have an option to look around, experiment with different kinds of opportunities within the same domain, and maybe possibly find jobs, move around. I think closer to today, I'm not even touching upon the COVID and post-COVID workforce. I'm talking about maybe just before that. I think people became a little bit more self-driven in the sense the millennials, the post-millennials, the Zen Ys and Zs possibly even then, they were like, I think what they were trying to do is that they were trying to make a statement. They would not, they would not stay within the confines of what defined their domains or their expertise or anything. They would find comfort in what they like to do. So even if it did not fit in with their education, how they have been trained, if this is something they felt comfortable in, they felt comfortable in the schemes, they would be happy and they would want to take an opportunity and chance. But largely confined to maybe one kind of work that they were excited about. So I think that is how these various generations have kind of evolved, progressed over time. And I know that now we are going towards a more dynamic world, and we'll talk more about it, Premrajji, as we go down the discussions. Has that been helpful? I hope I've been able to kind of put that differentiation in my mind across to this room.
Yeah, interesting perspective. And I like the way you put it, quest for questioning.
Yes, that's true. Yeah. The kind of, just to kind of give a little bit of a dimension to it is that I think people still question, even our times or before our times, but the questions were more in terms of what, possibly how. I think the questions now are more in terms of whys. So the rise in the actor in the sense they would want to know why they have to do what they have to do. This was not something which we were trained or taught to question. We knew that we had a job to do. We might question different ways to do it, but now it is the very basis of what exactly they want to do it is what people are questioning.
True, very true. In the previous question, you mentioned about being a Gallup certified coach. You are a Gallup certified strengths coach. Of the 34 Clifton strengths, why is it important for one to concentrate on the top 5 and then the next 5 rather than the ones at the bottom of the scales?
Okay. I love the Gallup model. So, given a chance, I could speak about it all day. I've kind of led sessions 2 days at a time with a small group of 18, 20 people, just talking about all these strengths that Gallup, talks about. But maybe given the constraints of our time, I'll try to kind of reduce it to our discussions. Very interesting question, Premrajji, and I think what Gallup talks about on talent is very interesting. It's almost like what they are calling the DNA, the building block of a person. It's something which supposedly, and in all probability, people are almost born with. The Gallup talent is what they are trying to define. Something which possibly they pick up very early as they grow their entire consciousness at the very early adoptive years. And what happens is, over a period of time, whether by nature or by nurture, they become very integral to a person. Now, herein lies the difference between somebody.
Indranil, your voice is cracking a bit.
Is it okay? Can I try another? Any better now?
Yeah, it's better now.
Okay, I'm trying to move between my system audio. So I don't know what, but anyway. So what I was trying to say was that, I think once we realize what the Gallup model talks about in terms of talent and intrinsic to somebody's, DNA, I think this is where it becomes important to understand how people use it, how people consciously or intentionally, mindfully use those talents to convert them into their strengths so that they're able to achieve any task. Now, to come back to your question, Primrajji, this is where it is where it kind of reflects. It says Gallup does not talk about strengths and weaknesses. There is no weaknesses in the Gallup model. In the list of the 34 different strengths they talk about, and all of them are called strengths, any individual can have any 510 at the bottom, any 510 at the top. It does not mean the ones at the bottom are weaknesses. What Gallup wants to say is that these are your lesser strengths, possibly because neither nature nor nurture developed them into your strengths. It stayed there. Maybe it was part of you, latently always available to you. And whenever you necessarily needed to call upon it, it would come to you. If you need to, for example, let's say empathy. Somebody might have empathy as a strength at the very bottom. But there could be times where you need to display immediate empathy, right? And it would come to you. That would be a particular situation that will kick it in you. It will kick that strength from the bottom 5 to a top 5 maybe. And it is very circumstantial and situational. However, what is important to realize is, why do you then focus on your top strengths and not always on a weakness? Because you would want to become an all-rounded personality. You would always want to say that I want to have every of those 34 strengths on top of my list. Why don't I focus on my weaknesses, so-called weaknesses, and bring them to the top? What happens is, the problem is that the things which are natural to you, it exerts or you expend lesser energy to make it come out, to make it visible to you. And if you want to intentionally bring something at the bottom of your list to be able to achieve a task, you expand more energy. Your energy is spent in trying to focus on building the skills and capabilities to do the job, and not the job which you would otherwise have done naturally. That is why, Premraji, it is very important for people to play to their strengths, and that is where the whole, I think, the phrase "play to their strengths" come from. You play to your strengths. Wherever required, you need to focus on something which is at the bottom of your list. You focus on it if you need to, but try to change the way you want to approach the task by using your strengths. And there are a lot of concepts around that. I'm sure we don't have time to get into all of those, but I think that is where it is important to focus on your top strengths, keep practicing it, keep learning about it, being intentional and more mindful of it. It becomes very useful, it becomes natural to you, and you are able to use them in your day-to-day lives.
Okay, that's an interesting perspective you have given us. A lot of food for thought for us. A lot of us here have our 34 strengths with us. So we will go back and revisit it based on what we have said now.
Yes.
Now let's go on to retention of employees. It's one of the biggest problems facing the corporate world. It is said people quit people, not companies. It is the immediate supervisor who is the cause of attrition in most cases. how is it that we can make managers more conscious of this fact?
That's a very, very strong, powerful, corporate conundrum as of today. And when I say corporate conundrum, I mean to say is over years, people in organizations have started or learned to function in certain ways. And let me talk about, let's say, the performance management, piece in any organization, right? It used to be very, cut and paste kind of a model. You had a goal setting, quote unquote, discussion at the beginning of the year. You probably had a mid-year review of what you had set as goals in the beginning of the year. And towards the end, you have a very impersonal rating discussion at the end of the year, and that closes the cycle. What has happened, I think, over the years is companies have started to realize that the resources, the primary and the most critical resources of any organization have become its people. And that is why human resources has become a very critical function. Earlier, I think, and I do still believe that a lot of companies still puts human resources as a peripheral function, support function. It's a corporate function. It is not core business. But now it is no more the case. What is happening is that the functions that human resources team had in their domain basically is now getting transferred to people and managers on the floor. People who are managing, people who are actually doing the business on the floor, on the shop floor. Now, in that process, what we are trying to do is we are trying to, or kind of, there's a lot of studies that have been done and great names, Gartner's, Deloitte, McKinsey's, Gallup, we all know. They've talked a lot about these models of engaging the employees. Engagement is a big factor in all of these areas. And people have been talking about engagement maybe even earlier days, but those engagements were like fringe benefits or stuff like that. But now engagement has become core to function. If you do not have an engaged employee, you do not have a motivated employee, you do not have a productive employee, or you do not have an employee who is willing to go the extra mile and this directly impacts the bottom line of the company. And companies have started realizing it. Earlier, the problem was, as Premraj, you rightly spoken, the employee would perceive the company only with the immediate supervisor. And the nature of that immediate supervisor will determine for that employee what the company was. So if the immediate supervisor was rude, impersonal, the employee would perceive the organization culture as rude. They would kind of think that is what the whole organization is all about. That has not changed. And then communications have become more direct. The CEOs of companies have started using internal social media fora to directly talk to employees. There are direct communication channels between employees and the top echelons of all the leadership. That is changing the dynamics where companies have started realizing that it is not just one manager that should be at the core of what you perceive the company as, right? So they need to now start thinking about how do you perceive it bigger, and how do you make the managers also realize that the employee that you are leading are people who are going to add to your value, to the company's value. And that is where I think there is a huge focus on changing business leaders, operational leaders, or managers into people leaders. That's where business leaders are being taught about how you become a human leader. There's this whole concept of being truly human, right? Being mindful. All of this is becoming an integral part of most organizations now. And those who haven't, I would say that they should see the light. They should work towards it, because the more they are, demotivating, disenchanting, disengaging people, the more they are hitting their own bottom lines, their own take-home salaries at the end of the day. So that is how I think all of this gets linked, and how people start feeling better about their own people so that they are able to feel better about themselves.
Employee engagement is the key. Let's take that forward. Gallup has devised a 7-step employee experience, what they call as the employee experience journey with an organization, starting with attract, hire, onboard, engage, perform, develop, and depart. It has been noticed that not many organizations really care about the last part of the journey, depart. A Gallup survey shows only 45% of employees are satisfied with how their exit has been handled. Why is this so?
So we'll come to the why exit process has not been a core focus. But if there are people here who can understand, if among those people who are exiting the organizations, and today, for example, I think in the service industry, the churn is close to around almost 20 to 24%. So 20 to 24% churning out of the company, even if 10% of them are your high performers, the high posts, imagine the kind of impact it is having to your business bottom line just by trying to getting people into their shoes, training them, getting them up to speed to be able to do what they have to do. So you're right, Premrajji, exit till recently wasn't at the core of a lot of companies. Some companies have started pivoting towards that, but they are preparing very strong post-exit, communities, alumni groups, company. I recently, left a company, a great company. I left it in very good terms because the entire process we kind of engaged in a proper discussion. It was a career-based discussion of how to move on and everything, which kind of turned out to be very productive for me. When I left the company, I realized that I was part of a very august alumni community. I am able to express with them. And what I've realized is that because of that reason, instead of what normally happens when somebody leaves a company, that is, they start bad-mouthing a company, right? That's what, if you go to any of the, indoors and other sites, they start talking about what didn't go right with them in the company. I realized that being part of a good alumni community, because I had exited very strong, because Accenture as a company helped me exit so strong, today I find a lot of good stuff still going on in that organization. Now that leaves a door open for both of us to engage in whatever capacity. It might not be that they would want to rehire me or I would want to go back to them. That is not the reason. We can still engage professionally, right? I, as a professional, have a lot of things to give back to organizations, to the community, and another company as an entity has a lot to take from me. So it will leave a lot of good taste in the mouth so that we are able to re-engage. And that is where I think companies have started focusing on the exit process, starting from, and also, by the way, going back to your previous question, Premrajji, I'm trying to make a differentiation. If managers are indeed the red flags, it is only a good, strong, transparent exit process which will catch those red flags early on in the system. So even organizations have started realizing that if they are not able to engage an exiting employee in a best of terms so that it leaves a good taste in the mouth for both of them, they themselves will fail to recognize people who might need to be maybe counseled, maybe trained, maybe retrained into becoming better people leaders in the organizations. So I think that's how it is. It is critical. Not everybody is doing it, but people have to really refocus on this.
So let's hope more organizations do it in a better way.
Yes, sir.
Abroad, we find big exploding surveys. Do you think in the near future, Indian corporates will also jump onto this bandwagon?
So gig working is, and I think that brings me to the post-COVID world, actually. When so many people lost their jobs for various reasons, they're struggling to make ends meet. in the quest to find something to live on, people have started getting into areas which they are not comfortable at. And, going back to my Gallup's, analogy, they would have to now exert more energy to be able to perform, because they will not be performing at their best, place. So what I think is going to, and this is already a phenomenon, I think the world over, I think US recently had, before the COVID world had said that almost 33% of their workforce are already, temping, or they are already working in a temp or a non organized, self kind of a motivated kind of a world. And that is now creating some kind of a pressure on the overall workforce, right? I think both the companies, organizations who earlier thought maybe this is a good model to get into, because they could reduce a lot of their overhead costs, right? They might not have to expand on some of their fixed overhead costs like benefits, health benefits, maybe post-retirement benefits. It would save them a lot of those in terms of their purses. But then they realized, I think, that there is a downside to it also, that when you do not have a permanent kind of a workforce, you start realizing that you do not have a good integrated team to work with. And teaming becoming a little scarce, especially in the post-COVID world, and people have started working remotely, mostly not getting connected. Immediately it might seem that there is a potential upside to it, but I think there is a good flip side to it also. And both at the employees end, I think there is a problem, in the sense, initially a lot of people who are very fatigued by the drive of the daily work, right? Sometimes it would exert a lot of them. There would no work-life balance. There would be no time for self-development. People would just come into offices, do their jobs. There would not be any time. They would be confined to work offices, and they found gig working to be a solution. They thought that, okay, great, I think it becomes easy for me. I can get into a job, temp it out, come back, take a break for some time and stuff. But now with COVID, what has happened is that space has become constrained. So there are too many people out there competing for the same opportunity to do that extra work. Now that is creating another problem in gig workers, is to find work, right? So now this is where I think the future of work lies. How do you manage to get a good hybrid model in place, which works both for the organizations and entities as well as for the individuals? A lot of companies are trying it out. I heard that there are companies who are now thinking of doing 4-day week and 3 days completely left to you. So 4 weekdays is a great idea, because anyways we are working, sometimes 18 hours a day. So people are experimenting with that. There are other options. They're coming up. The Uber and the other model, I think they have been challenged, but how Uber works with business owners as partners. So all of these are kind of working in some way. People are experimenting, but I do think, Premraji, to answer your question, that it is the way of the future. People are going to figure out more flexible ways of working instead of getting in a controlled environment, which the traditional workforce has been.
Yeah, let's hope it pans out, and let's also the unions in India do something could fall between the cracks. My last question to you before I hand over to Deepak. You have been bestowed with a string of prestigious awards. Which are the ones that gave you maximum satisfaction? And please don't be modest.
I think the first one I won, I still cherish it the most. I was a part of a big team. I work as an instructional designer. So I used to write content, right? What we did at that time was we thought futuristically. And then, by the way, one of my Gallup strengths in the top 5 is being futuristic. So I always think about the future. And at that time, I did not know about Gallup, but I remember what I was working on. And I remembered I was working on it in a futuristic manner. I kept on thinking about how to do it differently. And how do I write something which is very, outside what we are already doing? How do we push that envelope is what I remembered thinking around when I was part of that project. And we worked on something. We had a very, very tough, customer who was sitting out of the US, who challenged us at every step of the day. At the end of the day, when we would have a call with her, it would seem as if whatever we conceived all through the day was actually challenging us. And what we realized, and what we didn't realize, is that through that process of very high heat tempering, we came up with some products that were out of the world, that were futuristic, that had simulations which we didn't think possible at those times, where we used to do mostly cut and paste e-learning programs, page turner e-learning programs. We created branched learnings, and I'm talking about 2002, 2003, where we really did not have even tools to do it, but we managed to do it. The designer, the developer team, the designing team, us instructional designers, the program managers who managed to convey our ideas to our leaders. How it kind of ended up is that the final product, how it got nominated for an award, which was the Golden Peacock Award, one of the most coveted, prestigious, award in the HR people industry. It got nominated and we won. We never realized that happened because all through the process, we were just concentrating on using our strengths to do or come up with a product that was superb. It was beyond an immediate, expectation. We just concentrated on the awards just came to us. And I still think today, even today, after multiple such, awards that I have been part of everywhere, I think that was the most coveted. I still, cherish. I still have the team connected. In fact, we got connected through a WhatsApp group and we were talking to each other about that. Even the project manager is part of that group now. And we really have fun trying to remember those things. So I think that is one. There have been many others over the years, but Golden Peacock for my first project, I did win another couple of Golden Peacocks later on as part of, in fact, one as a team leader. But the one which I won at the front, the top, was what I always cherish and I love it, having won that.
Please savor the moment, and we wish you many more accolades in future.
Thank you. Thank you so much.
And before I come back to wind up, I request Deepak to please take it forward. Deepak, all yours.
Multiple Golden Peacock Awards. I mean, this is really, really wonderful. I mean, such a, great motivation and inspiration just to be with you in the same space, in the same room, So wonderful. I mean, I've been enjoying these last 35, 40 minutes we spent together. And I want to pick your brains a little bit more on the Gallup, since you are a certified coach and you had done programs and you said you could do it for 2 days. We have 15, 20 minutes left, but I would like you to first tell our audience what is the right age to take a Clifton test or now the Gallup test. Why? Because you spoke of nature and nurture. There are some God-given gifts which you have been born with. That's the way you are. That's in your DNA. Something needs to be nurtured. So what is the right age which you feel this is the right age to get these tests done, to know your strengths, to work on those and become better on them?
So, okay. So there are so many psychometrics available to people today, right? What do you think, and especially let me focus my discussion on Gallups for now. I do think that Gallups is best taken once you have a little bit of a history behind you in terms of when you're in the workplace or you're contributing professionally. I think what it will do is that it will prime you to accept your results better. And you will start acknowledging and appreciating the results much better once you have a point of reference that you can go back to with the results you have in your hand. So it is like, it kind of endorses what you have been able to achieve. At the same time, it gives you a legitimacy in terms of what you now see as your list of strengths in front of you. And you realize how they have one-on-one correlation and how this becomes a great focal point or a pivoting point for you to invest more in, to ensure such achievements or successes even in future. And the good thing is that once you have that, and that also helps you get into a little bit of a matured state in your own mind, what happens is you are able to dissect, you are able to analyze your own achievement, not necessarily in your professional world, but also in your personal world a little bit more objectively. You start realizing that the great, let's say, a dinner party that you organized during the silver jubilee celebration of your parents, or a golden jubilee celebration of your parents' wedding, the way you organized it, you just hit the ball out of the park. Why? Because you subconsciously were working with your strengths, and you can actually directly start relating it back to your strengths. So both of them kind of reinforces each other, the results as well as your achievement. So that is the reason I think you should start Gallups at least after you spend a little time having gained some experiences. But there are others, which kind of help people to identify, basic strengths and skills. You could use some of them much earlier in your career, but I do think, you should let a little time pass if you want to use it intentionally in future also.
Yeah. And thank you for explaining that and sharing that. And the reason why I asked this question was, I always thought, and I believe that, I've been blessed with a strong voice. I am a good communicator. It's very, very easy for me to get my point across. 2 years back, when we did my Gallup strength reports for the first time, communication was actually number 4. I have harmony at number 1. There is adaptability at number 2. There is connectedness at number 3. I never really thought of myself as a connector, or somebody who adapts quickly to this situation, or somebody who is in harmony with everybody. I thought, I am the one. I am the boss. I have the voice. I can make things happen. I am the kingmaker. But when you do these tests, something actually different comes out from what you actually thought of yourself. Now I want to move this to an employee relation. As an organization, I've got this done for my employees. Now I find these employees have these traits, but he or she is not actually utilizing those traits in the position or the job or the position he or she is enjoying. What does an employer do in those cases? Does he move them, shift them, tell them to adapt to what you are doing? What do you see?
So, very important, and we talked about it a little while earlier when I was talking to Premraj, was we're talking about how managers have to start becoming people leaders, right? Because that is the inflection point. Every conversation that we do at the workplace becomes an important input to that process of changing an employee or the individual to start working on strength areas and use his strength to do a particular job. So remember, as I said, to be impactful and to derive the best out of the Gallup, model is not to change the job or the work. It is the way you change the way you do the work, the approach you take to a work. And the whole conversation that we are talking about today, the meaningful conversation, right? That is the word which Gallup also suggests, that are your conversations meaningful? So there is a model they have suggested, and a lot of these, the managers are put in a coach's shoe. A lot of the answers to the questions that you say when employees or individuals are not able to do or not able to leverage their strengths to the best of their capability, the answer sometimes lies with them. And if the manager learns to, and that is where this, the meaningful conversation discussion comes into picture. If the manager is taught, or he or she are able to use powerful questions in the course of daily discussions with employees, the answers to how to differently approach that same task will come from the employee themselves. So that is where the whole approach changes. Instead of directing, instead of telling somebody how you have to, or what you have to do and how you have to do, try and see if you are able to gauge that answer from the other side. But yes, as a manager, you need to still moderate that discussion to ensure that a person you want somebody to increase revenue does not meander off to start playing football somewhere. So you need to moderate the discussion also.
Yeah. Thank you. Thank you for that. And coming back to the vast experience you have had over the last 20 years of working with different organizations, some really big ones, multinational ones, Indian ones also. How have these tests, when they are done, changed the course of the employee or that organization or even that manager? If you remember something which you can recall, I remember this person, he got his test done. We came to know that these were his points. He worked on this and his life changed.
There are multiple examples there. We have a humongous amount of data that it works in the real life. It seems daunting in the beginning, and what I've realized over working with different organizations is that we do have a very inquisitive, introspective leadership everywhere. Who are constantly trying to improve the way the organization functions, the people function. They are thinking of the betterment of the people. So they do try and bring in the best everywhere. And what I realize is that anything that gets introduced into the system, it is just like, it's just as the virus, right? There are antibodies which are already in your body which will try to fight the virus. But then whether you call it the virus or you call it agent of change is how you'd want to define it. If it is a virus, it can disrupt the workplace. If it is a real agent of change, and if you are able to constantly infuse and evolve that, looking at how the resistance in the system is trying to stop it, you will be able to still get into the heart and soul of the organization and people to be able to make a change. What we realized anywhere I've been to, whether it is, I remember in my IBM days where we had this huge, the IBM ambassador program, right? Converting every IBMer into an ambassador for the organization. So unless and until somebody believes, until and somebody becomes that organization, he or she cannot be the ambassador. He or she cannot be the defender of of that entity that you are an ambassador of. So the whole focus of the cultural imbibement, whole focus of people imbibement, appreciation of what is happening, why it is happening, the way it is happening, that makes a lot of change. And I've seen a lot of critics, a lot of skeptics. They suddenly start seeing things in a different light. Processes they would start, they would maybe criticize, they would not want to get to be part of. They would become sponsors. Actually, they would start becoming big mouthpieces for those programs because they see the value over a period of time. But somebody took the pain to show them. So that is where I think that is where it differentiates a fad in something like a fad versus something which has some meaningful reason to be there in the first place. So I think everywhere, the whole movement from the bell curve based, performance management system to a flat stage, it took some time. People were very worried about how compensation would be impacted, but it did not. I think compensation became better. People started accepting compensation much better than once they were earlier pitted in that bell curve, the bottom 5 or the top, especially the middle, the whole 90% range. Like they had the biggest challenge. They didn't know who they were being pitted against. So all of this got taken care of gradually in the organizations that have applied that. There are areas that that still needs, but I do still think that this is an evolutionary process. People will come up with hybrid models. It is never one way or the other. It is always a middle ground that people will have to, as organizations and people, find out.
Yeah, now I want to wear your futurist hat. The future is glasses. You know, we all suffer from a recency bias. Up to before pre-COVID, everybody was traveling, there was hospitality, people were working from their office. After what has happened in the last 1.5 years, everybody is now talking of work from home. And everyone you ask is saying it's going to be hybrid, part home, part work. Do you see a situation in the near future where this line between home and work office disappears? So your work will be office and your office will actually be home. It will be some sort of a superstructure or a city or a dwelling, a place where everything is interconnected. You have a watch which is connected, your mobile is connected, your glasses are connected, your car is connected to the server. You're not actually going to office. It's an office and home all in one. Is that a possibility in the near future?
It is, and it is coming sooner than we can think of. So people were already thinking on those lines. It's not a new concept. It was there. Organizations like the Googles of the world were already experimenting in trying to merge home and office and ways. The whole concept of Internet of Things, where everything is connected with smart devices and connected devices. Everybody were already in that process. I think what COVID will do is this is going to provide an impetus like never before. I think COVID has been the biggest chief information officer or chief technology officer than any human being has ever been for the last 3-4 decades. I think they kind of hastened that change. It is everybody's pivoting to that model. You are right. People, in fact, employees across the globe, across organizations are still wondering, and that is where organizations have to be more transparent and more communicative about what they're thinking about the future, especially in the remote workforce. Today, I see, for example, some of my team members who were earlier confined to a particular place. I see them working from faraway places, maybe in the hills and stuff. What I am only concerned about right now is that, am I going to achieve productivity in this environment? So how do we do it? And I think technology will be the enabler to figure out if there is enough productivity in that dispersed kind of a workforce. But the fact that this mixed model is going to be more productive there is no question about. It will save a lot of the pressure. It is like it is the pressure cooker valve that is getting built into that pressure, right? Because I think a lot of people have been telling me about that the COVID situation has put some kind of a pause to the mad rush people had to get ahead of things. So I think it is going to put that pressure cooker. It is not going to be a full valve, neither it is going to be something docked in. It will be a hybrid model to let off some steam, getting people to work at their wheel at the same time in a moderated control environment. But it is coming sooner than we think.
Yeah, thank you. Thank you for sharing that. And we have 24 people in the room who have been with us for the past 1 hour. If any one of you would like to ask a question to Indranil, please unmute yourself and ask.
Hi, can you hear me?
Go ahead, please, Pranab. Go ahead.
So I am Pranab. I am based in Bangalore, working as a project manager, oil and gas for Shell India. So I know Indranil from our school days. So we were sort of chuddy buddies from 4th to 12th. And it's being very heartening to see that my school friend is being such a vocalist now. My question to you is that for a person like me who has completed 2/3 of my career and are left out with 1/3, and if I have to categorize my nature-based strengths and nurture-based strengths, how do I do that? And if I have to uplift some of the strengths from the bottom of the list to the top, these are my two questions, if you can enlighten. Thank you.
So I'll take the first, I'll take the second question first, Pranav. And also to qualify, gentlemen, Pranav did say that we were school friends together even before my army school day. From class 4th, we were together actually, and then we went together to an army school. So he and I shared that. We share a very healthy, points of differences. So even in either side of the divide, we would take positions just because it helps us debate. So great to see you here, Pranav. Happy to hear your question. The first question, the second question, and let me try to understand, tell you. As I mentioned earlier, do not try to, overtly focus on trying to bring the bottom 5 strengths. Again, I'm using the word strengths and not weaknesses because a lot of people confuse what is at the bottom of that list of 34, capabilities or qualities as weaknesses. So do not try to focus on them. When required, when a particular strength will be needed, you will not need to summon it. It will come to you. Okay, and I gave an example of empathy, right? Let's say your empathy is at the bottom of the list. Okay, but let's say you are in a room full of people and somebody walks in that room. Ideally, if you are an unempathetic, ideally, if you're not the kind that is unempathetic or something, you see somebody walking in a room and maybe stumble a little bit. In all probability, because your strength is not expressing your empathy immediately, you just look at that person, see if that person has been attended to, and you will kind of look back and start doing your own work. Right? But in that case, that same person walking in is somebody near and dear to you, let's say your child, who came and stumbled. You will not think once or twice to see who has now generated his or her empathetic strength to rush to that. You will immediately do it. It will come to you immediately. Similarly, if you want to extend that analogy in the workspace also, if, for example, you are needed, let's say futuristic is at the bottom of your list, but you are needed at a particular point when you're doing your project management planning, and you are needed to think about an ecological issue maybe 15 years down the line. Because it is needed, you will summon it at that point in time, which might not be a logical or the most natural way that you would have otherwise done your project management plan. Right? Because it will be needed, it will be brought to your attention, to your notice, you will use it intentionally. But the problem, as I said, is to be able to use that bottom strength, the kind of energy that you will expend will be much more than maybe your other strength. Let's say your analytical is your strength, is one of your strengths, which is your top side. You would rather need to use your analytical capability to figure out the future than using your futuristic strength to
Cannot hear you, Indranil.
Yeah, we lost your audio again, Indranil. You'll have to probably recheck. Yeah.
I'm doing something again, same. Oh,
Yeah, it's okay.
Yes. This is better. Yes. Yes.
Oh, wonderful. Okay.
Yes.
So I hope, Pranav, the fact about how to use your strength intentionally, mindfully, inspirationally comes into, play. How do you become more mindful, less mindful about how to use which part of your strength? That is one. The other question you had was about nature versus nurture. Again, the same thing. The ones that nature has built inside you and is going to temper in you is going to be a more natural stuff. You will not need to expand your energy in trying to build it. So if you are a cricket player and you're by nature you are able to see a fast ball and you're able to see the way the seam has been placed, you would know when to move your front foot out and your bat and hit it straight out. Right? But if you have had to practice it over a lot of time, the amount of concentration that you will have to put on that one effort to see whether you would want to play it on the front foot or you would want to defend it the back foot, that would be an additional stress and effort with you. And that is why maybe that's a difference between how a Sachin Tendulkar would hit a six versus how a Harbhajan Singh would hit a 6.
Yeah.
And hope that's good enough for you, Pranav, for now.
Yeah. Thank you.
Thank you. Yeah.
Thank you. Thank you, Pranav, for asking that question. Anybody else?
Yeah,
You could also
may I just,
yes, Eric, go ahead. Go ahead, Eric. Yes.
having been many boardrooms and consultants, different types of companies, and being aware of Gallup, Strength Finder, and all of these things, which are very useful. A lot of people look at them as theoretical concepts, and I have to say I'm sitting on the fence, quite honestly. Though I am a great reader and I just love newer concepts, and I would wish for them to work in all cases. The fact is, I've been in several situations, and some of them are quite sad because they are, when you have to let somebody go off because of the whole need for downsizing in an organization, let's say. Now we are reviewing people, to say out of these 200 guys, we can only keep 130. 70 guys will have to go. Which will be these 70 guys? What are their strengths? What are the weaknesses? And more important, the downsizing requires that certain new strengths and new skills or adaptability to a new situation happens.
Yes.
So that is where this concept is quite useful and insightful, and for both sides, both the person who has to do the evaluation as the person who has to adapt to it by being a better future employee, because it's not going to work in the future environment for him to remain the same person that he was earlier. But what I found, and this is the gist of the core of my question, is that if these people have reached a mid-level in their careers, then what has happened is they are not in a situation which is a very different situation where you're a newcomer and you're saying, okay, let me find out my strengths, I'll work on my strengths, I'll ignore the lesser strengths because now, what comes natural to me, I'm going to focus on that, and that will give me a faster takeoff in my career growth. That is at that level of career. But what happens is when, after being 20, 25 years, you have then automatically, before even learning or even hearing about this strength finder and these things, and you're on the receiving end of, the short end of the stick. And then you are to change those habits. And what I have found, and I have tried, and we've tried to work with guys who had the inclination but did not have the ability, and see how can the new abilities be inculcated if possible. And I personally have been very frustrated and very saddened that, habits is a very big thing. You can just say, listen, this is what you should do. And that's theoretical. This is what your strengths are. This is what it is. But then what comes in the way is his habitual reaction. And these are usually, behavioral science things. What happens, there's a outside thing which creates a feeling and an emotion, and then from the emotion that leads to action, and that then habit comes in and makes it almost automatic. And yet there are, in these cases that you're talking about, you'll have to break, there's what in NLP they'll call a pattern interrupt. And you have to break the pattern before you can make any change, before you can, focus on the strength that you would prefer compared to the older. I don't know whether I'm being coherent enough to get the problem. And would you have your own experiences helped in such a way? And because that would really be something very useful. How to overcome the shackles of habit.
Yeah, Eric, thanks for bringing the question. One very important element of any behavioral science is the constant questioning of the relevancy in real world. Because a lot of these behavioral sciences are theoretically extremely strong, but when tested in the real world, they do at times, stumble. There are areas they need to work out on. And none of these is an absolute science. It is not a book that you take to a boardroom, as you said, to discuss how do you decide change and use it. That is not going to be any sane behavioral scientist's approach. That somebody would always want you to temper it with realities of the business, the situation of people at the same time. However, the broad guidelines, I think, the principles still stand. The parameters might not. The principle that it says that you will work best if you are in your areas of strength, that need not be tested. That is a time-tested stuff, already always visible. What these sciences have now done is made the ability to document those in a better way, so that you are able to make more data-driven decisions. Earlier, it would be more in terms of what I felt. It would be very subjective, me as an individual, or maybe a few leaders, or maybe as a group. It would be very subjective. However, what is now happening is, with all of these different tools that are coming to our hands, we can use that. We can decide to use it or not use it based on that particular scenario and circumstance. For example, if the need is immediate, it's like, if there is gangrene and you need to sever that part of the body, you need to do it. You cannot wait for other theoretical studies to be conducted to decide whether it works or it doesn't work. But at the same time, if you realize that there is, and there are people still working on, diseases like Alzheimer's and other diseases in which people are experimenting, despite knowing that it is an evolutionary process of degeneration, and over a period of time there is going to be something, but still people are experimenting. They have theoretical ways. They are doing behavioral interventions instead of medicinal interventions just to cure diseases of that kind. Over a period of time, possibly the data that is going to get collected is going to help make more decisions or more useful decisions than they are able to do it today. But as of now, you are completely right, Eric. I would not use that as a handbook to do a particular task in an organization. It is still evolving in the organization. It is still evolutionary. It is going to take a little bit more of patience and I think sponsorship. What I also feel, Eric, is that if any organization picks up any model such as Gallup, it is important that the sponsorship is there from the very top of the organization to the bottom, right? Everybody needs to understand that one frame of mind in which to operate. Then that alignment becomes, and it has to be a willing participatory process. It cannot be a direction that today this is what will drive whether you have a job tomorrow. That cannot be the way to make that decision. I do think behavioral sciences has it has their limitations, but it is a science to still believe in. That is why I think it is still called sciences. It is not still completely in the domain of art. So that's how I think, Eric, we could approach this.
If I can add a little bit to what you've said, which you mentioned earlier, the whole thing benefits if the top management, as you said, it begins at the very top, has an humane approach to this whole thing, to see people as all different individuals. There are no, I mean, in a company with hundreds or even thousands of companies, there's no way. It's like each one's got an individual thumbprint. Each one's got a separate pattern out of this whole combination of 30 odd strengths. To have that, just that right combination, and that combination must fit into the DNA of the culture of the organization. You're asking for an impossible task. So sometimes I think, you have to let go the person, but you have to do it in the most humane way. And in fact, there are many cases where a lot of people thought at that time they're going through a tremendous crisis, and they were. Then the moment they were let go or they chose to leave, or and they found that now I'm sitting at home, I have a chance to be the photographer I wanted to be. I wanted to work with young kids, teaching them, English or whatever it might be. And their whole life has changed so much for the better. There is none of the stress that was earlier trying to reach the corporate, mold, fit into that mold and stuff. So that is one. So that is one, I think, we should not expect that everybody can fit into the best strengths profile that the corporate might benefit from. We have to make those adjustments, and when it's necessary, the people on both sides should see there might be an opportunity to have a better life, and that is where the corporates can also help, by providing post-exit, various kinds of benefits, and we can give you a stipend towards a new course. You want to upgrade your skills or something else, in something more that you naturally are imbibed. But this takes off onto another point relevant to Bloom now. Bloom is, we've been having some talks recently on the focus of Bloom, and Indranil, it might be of special interest to you, and that's why you being on today's program was of great interest to me. And that is, Bloom wants to do a lot of focus on the newcomers coming into industry. And those are the people, I think, who will benefit most from the Strength Finder, from Gallup and such initiative. It's an old enough, well-tried enough, well, as you said, there's a plethora of cases where suddenly, people have found that they become sponsors of the thing, they become crusaders for this thing. And I think if we can find a way to reach this thing out to more people who are in the threshold of industry experience, where they can find the careers that suit them best rather than being fitted in and saying, this is what I got to do. But if they know their strengths, then they can say, okay, in this organization, I'm being taken in here, but I should gravitate towards, say, HR, or I should gravitate towards project management, or I should develop towards R&D because I've got the futurist bent of mind, and why fight it, rather make the most of it. So Bloom is looking at it, and I'm sure that, we'll call on your ideas in the future.
I would love to discuss that. A little, thought in my mind basically is that, and I agree with, Don Clifton, who said that let's not start using it prescriptively. That is, we need to be clear, to stay clear of using it as a prescription for roles. And that is something which we have been, the whole Bloom, the Gallup philosophy asks us to stay clear of. Yes, you're right. If there is a version of it that can still be used to gauge interests and strengths in some way. But again, as I said, very early on in the career, I am just a little, worried. Maybe, we'll need a bit more discussions and study around it is without adequate amount of experience to back up the findings, people might start taking some of these as a gospel, and without an anchor. They might take that to be the anchor instead of the experiences they have gained in the industry. Yeah. So that is why I still agree. That it makes good sense that people at the threshold of their career should have some kind of a guidance to tell them what their strengths are. But that is a point of discussion, that what could it be? This 34 strengths and the way they are described, I think it's a little too early for them to immediately get into this. But we can still discuss and find out if there is some other options that we can think about and practice.
Thank you. Thank you, Eric. Thank you, Eric, for asking this question and your inputs. Last question from Vidya. Vidya, go ahead, please. Unmute yourself.
Thank you so much for this session, Indranil. It was really insightful. My name is Vidya, and I work for AXA XL as a learning and development partner. And my question again is pretty much pertaining to the learning field. So a lot of times we've heard managers say people that, you need to start working on your improvement areas, and the constant feedback that's given is more towards highlighting the improvement area and negating the strengths which are there for people. Now, when we talk about people at the early age, when they have just come into the industry, and when I say industry, I'm talking about the corporate world, they are in that zone wherein they are looking for some kind of guidance and acknowledgement to what they really bring in, because they're still in that enthu cutlet zone. And then when the managers start feeling that probably somewhere their way of approaching things or their behavior is not in line with the company values or the way the company is structured, and there's a disconnect, there's a very loosely used term that we all use, is that this is how millennials behave, or this is how millennials are. So these are some tags that we tend to use. So wanted to understand from you, with your experience in the talent development field, that how would you kind of look at this, and if you could share some insights.
So I remember a recent study that said that over 24 or 27% of an interviewed group of mixed generational people said that they hated these review discussions in which all they got was feedback. The word feedback itself is problematic, right? Talking about feed, but from the back, which is actually the whole problem with these discussions. And that is why the whole concept of meaningful conversation, which is this is a paradigm shift actually in terms of how you have those conversations. The questions are mostly straightforward. They're mostly talking about the future. They are participative. They are it's not just transactional. People are no more talking about how many sales you closed or how many what is the customer satisfaction score that you got in the last week. That is not the only, and that is what the prescription is. Okay, that how do people start or stop becoming operations manager and supervisors, floor supervisors, and become people leaders. Start talking about people's contributions, aspirations, and everything from day one. And that is why when I say day one, I mean to say this conversation has to happen throughout the whole year till the end of the whole cycle. It should not. There is no start point. There is no end point. It's not one cycle conversation. How it helps is basically what it does. I think is that it takes away that that transactional impact for that one conversation or the pressure on that one conversation. So people over a period of time, they start getting aligned to their contributions, how they have intentionally used or what have they contributed. You ask a question to somebody that if your score is at 3.5 and you needed to bring it 3.7, what is it that you would do? Instead of me saying that these are the five prescriptions that I have for you, go and start implementing so that I can see a 3.7. That is not going to happen. So the conversation has to veer towards getting the answers from the person. That makes that person participative in the process. If an employee commits to doing certain things based on what they feel they can do best and able to achieve a 3.7, and even if that person reaches 3.6, if that jump can be celebrated in the next conversation they have, that itself makes that person empowered to think productively and becoming more a part of the system than being just a recipient of a feedback and has a checklist of stuff.
Thank you.
The idea is to
Thank you so much.
Meaningful conversation is the whole idea.
Absolutely.
Super question, Vidya. Great answer, Indranil.
Absolutely.
It is a Sunday. It is 1:48. A lot of people have moved out because it is close to lunchtime. I want to personally acknowledge the 20 people in this room. There is Divya Garg, there is Dr. Rao, there is Anubhuti, there is Nishta, there is Dr. Jagdish, Tehseen, there is Tanmoy, Team Bloom is here, Abhijit is here, Pranav is here, Anand is here, Dr. Neeta is here. Thank you everyone for staying on till the end. I hand over the mic to Premraj to close. Premraj, over to you.
Yeah. Indranil, thank you for your time. The insights you shared based on your varied experience has enriched our knowledge and perspective. We are richer by it. Your down-to-earth, humble nature has endeared you to us. We wish you continued success in all your endeavors and look forward to your continued association with Bloom. Thank you and God bless.
It was an honor and a pleasure. I thank all of you for giving the chance and everybody who is still here in the call. Thank you so much for your time.
Thank you.
While ma'am, if you can please convey my thanks to Archie who introduced me to this forum. I'm not sure, maybe she's not here, but thank you so much for
in the morning. It's been busy. So thank you, Indranilji. It's indeed an honor and privilege to have you on Bloom. Looking forward for more such heartening conversations and a long collaboration with Bloom.
I look forward to that, ma'am. Thank you so much.
Thank you, beautiful audience, for staying here. Beautiful Sunday afternoon.
Thank you, Indra. Thank you, Bloom.
Thank
And
you.
thanks
Thank
all
you
our
very
good.
much.
Thank you. Bye.
Thank you, Team
Oh,
Bloom.
I see my
Amazing
daughter
session.
here, by the way. My daughter is here. Thank you. I did just criticism after this. Nishka, she's my daughter. She's in her first year journalism this year. She joined. So she joined the conversation. Thank you, Nishka.
Nishta, if we could see you and you could say a few words, Nishta.
She may be playing with the dog, but
Yeah, hi.
She's coming. She's coming.
There she is, yes.
I'm usually I like to listen when my dad talks because it's very inspiring. So
Yeah.
yeah, same. Um,
Yeah.
yeah, so I personally would really like to follow in his footsteps. The way he presents himself and the way he talks publicly, and the way he presents himself. Because I'm I'm kind of scared of public speaking. It really makes me nervous. Uh, so yeah, so that's what I aspire to learn from him.
Nishta, you are in the right proximity, you are in the right room at the right time. I can guarantee you that you will definitely become a good public speaker just by being in and around these people.
Yeah.
Yes.
Well, Indranil, your daughter as a journalist has given you a tremendously great report. Congratulations.
I just want to tell her that no bias is involved. Okay.
Yeah.
Thank you so much once again, everybody. Thanks for being here. And
Thanks. It was wonderful. Thank you.
Thank you.
Thank you for
Thank you. Bye.
thank you for staying till the end, everyone. See you next